All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited to kick off January with continuing our OREC series. This is our episode 2. If you missed our first episode, it basically is what is an OREC? What is an Office of Outdoor Recreation? And what does it do? And the history behind that in California and what unfolded and why we don't have one today. So now we're trying to build an argument for the administration and the governor and prove to him that we need an OREC in California. Um, and today we'll talk more about that. But basically, at Corp, we believe that we are missing out on some economic dollars and a lot of communication. And we'll dive more into that. Great. So today we're going to listen to a webinar on the benefits of an Office of Outdoor Recreation. We will have Q&A at the ends if you would like to ask any questions. And I'm really grateful to have a couple of great speakers who I'll introduce in a moment. For those that don't know me, I'm Lexie Gritlefeld. I'm the Director of California Outdoor Recreation Partnership. We go by CORP as our acronym. And what are we? We're a 501c6 nonprofit organization that represents 80 plus outdoor industry members in the state of California. You do not have to be located in California to join because we know that California accounts for a lot of the industry's sales, 20 to 25%, depending on which brand. And then also we know that California also has huge policy initiatives that are groundbreaking, but also impact the industry. And so we encourage everyone to get involved with us if they would like. We exist to power a voice for the outdoor recreation industry to shape policy, support investments, and engage an inclusive community of outdoor participants in California around the benefits of outdoor recreation. Our BA numbers were released this past November for the previous year, and they are up again. We're at 81.5 billion dollars spending annually and over 545,000 direct jobs attributed by the outdoor industry. This does include boating and motorized, just so folks know. Today, I am privileged to have a couple of my great colleagues on this webinar. I am very grateful for their work in this space, but also for their expertise, and I'm hoping to have them shed light on what an Office of Outdoor Recreation does, but also what the benefits are and why everyone should have one, and maybe why we should have one nationally. Although we are located in California, I want this webinar to also inspire others in states that don't have an OREC. So we'll be talking broadly about what an OREC does. First, we're joined by Chris Perkins, and I'm really grateful to have Outdoor Recreation Roundtable's partnership on this webinar. Chris is the Vice President of Programs at Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which goes by ORR as an acronym, where he works to promote the sustainable growth of the outdoor recreation economy. This work primarily focuses on the spaces of rural economic development through outdoor recreation infrastructure, state outdoor recreation advocacy, the outdoor recreation workforce, and building a more inclusive outdoor recreation community. Chris received his master's in environmental management and his MBA at the Yale School of Environment and Yale School of Management, so very impressive. Chris has also worked for the U.S. House of Representatives Natural Resources Committee Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee. And Chris, I have a question for you. How do you like to spend your time outside?
Oh boy. Well, I'm a parent of two kids under two, so like getting the stroller out of the driveway is a huge win these days, Lexi. But of course, it is Nordic season, and every year in February I do what's called the Moose Chase in Jackson, Wyoming. And my goal is to not lose. I've staved off last place for a couple years now, and hopefully this is the third year running. Looking forward to it.
That's awesome. I hope they never find you. That's great. Awesome. And then I'm also grateful to have Conor Hall on this webinar. Conor is the director of the Colorado Outdoor Recreation Industry Office, or their OREC. Colorado has one, California does not, so put that on your list. Conor hails from the mountains of Southwest Colorado. One of my favorite fun facts from your bio, Conor, is that you set multiple fundraising records working in Texas for the 2008 Obama campaign. I thought that was a great fun fact.
I think that just ages me more than anything else.
No, it's awesome. Conor previously worked for Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper's Office of Community Partnership and went on to serve as the Director of Advance and Special Advisor to the Governor, where he last served as the Director of External Affairs and Senior Advisor to the Governor. Conor served as Senior Advisor on Climate and Conservation on Michael Bloomberg's 2020 campaign. Conor has a degree in politics from Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana, in case there's anyone else from Earlham on this call. And Conor, I have the same question for you. How do you like to spend your time outside?
Yeah, great question. Honestly, anything that gets me outside, I will happily do with a lot of joy. I'm not great at everything. I'm, mediocre at some of those things, but the big things I like to do, depending on the season. I mean, in winter, we're so lucky in the state of Colorado to have the ski resorts and the snow we have. So I'm a really big snowboarder, but I've been getting really into snowmobiling actually. And I've, just really, really enjoyed that. But truly, the answer is anything that gets me outside into nature, I will very, very happily do.
That's awesome. I love it. Great. Well, without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to seamlessly get to Chris's slides. Oh, yes.
Perfect.
I'll turn over to Chris.
Thanks, Lexie. This is an awesome privilege getting the invitation to speak with you and the esteemed members of Corp, as well as great colleagues of Corp. Don't let my Wyoming address fool you. California is in my blood. My parents went to Berkeley. I was born at Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley. Go Bears. My parents live in South Lake Tahoe. I've spent many summers going to Sacramento Delta up in Walnut Grove and love the state very much. So again, just a real honor and privilege to be on the call. And I actually wanted to start, Lexie, by just doing a little exercise to gauge the temperature of the room, if that's okay. So I'm going to say some statements, and I just want you to give me a thumbs up to the Zoom screen if you agree with these statements. Okay, so give me a thumbs up if you love to spend time outside. Good, feels pretty unanimous. Give me a thumbs up if you feel that the outdoors is good for our health. Awesome. Also feels unanimous. Thumbs up if you feel that the outdoors can support small businesses. Perfect. And finally, give me a thumbs up if you love the California Department of Food and Agriculture, Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation. Okay, Lexie, that one felt a little different. Maybe it was just me, but I want to talk about this office real quick. The Office of Environmental Farming and Innovation at the California Department of Food and Agriculture. What a cool office. They use the best available science and knowledge from the agricultural community to design and implement practical solutions to California's natural resource challenges, to improve the environmental and economic sustainability of producing nutritious food, fiber, and energy. And that is awesome. And, an office like this is not that sexy or well known, but it just makes sense for California. Agriculture is such a big deal for the state. In fact, in 2023, according to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, farming contributed nearly $31 billion to California's economy. That's almost 1% of GDP. And of course, it's not just California's economy. Agriculture is kind of part of its identity and its culture, right? Like I can feel that when I go to Walnut Grove in the summers. And so having an office like this one is so helpful to connect California's agriculture businesses to support services as well as stakeholders and community members in what is such a critical sector of California's economy. But Lexie, let's look at the data. According to the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, the same US Bureau of Economic Analysis, outdoor recreation contributed $81.5 billion in GDP to California in 2023. Yet, I would argue, and perhaps some would agree, that outdoor recreation in state government doesn't have this same level of central coordination and strategy and implementation and efficiency to help build and sustain this critical sector of California's economy. And so it's with this inspiration in mind that I'm here to make the case that California would benefit from an Office of Outdoor Recreation or Office of Outdoor Recreation Economy, or whatever state you're a part of, to help accomplish similar goals. As Lexie noted, my name is Chris Perkins. I work for the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. You can see in these graphics that we're an association of organizations, being trade associations and businesses and state offices of outdoor recreation and colleges and universities, who represent the full spectrum of the outdoor recreation economy. That could be hiking, biking, skiing, climbing, hunting, fishing, boating, off-highway vehicles, camping, RV, hospitality, horseback riding, you name it. And it's with this structure that we make the case that outdoor recreation is a really great thing for our country, not just for our physical and mental health or our connection to the natural world, but also its role in our economy. And the state office of outdoor recreation is a central structure in that mission. We feel that these offices are the best connected and most effective to implementing strategies and solutions on the ground to help grow and sustain their state's outdoor recreation economies and connect all constituents to the benefits of the outdoors. And I want to talk a little bit more about some of the data that we've seen recently, just on a national scale. Again, the same Bureau of Economic Analysis released a report that showed outdoor recreation's economic contribution to the US at $1.2 trillion. This is 2.3% of GDP, 5 million jobs, 3.1% of employment, growing faster than the US economy over the same time period. And going a little bit deeper in the data, you see that by size, California is indeed the largest outdoor recreation economy in the country at over $80 billion. But some of these states that are growing quickly might surprise you, seeing Massachusetts, Hawaii, Alaska, Nevada, Maryland in the top 5. In fact, California is 26th in year-over-year growth. Again, just comparing outdoor recreation to other well-known segments of the US economy, that mining number should be 1.3. But seeing that outdoor recreation outpaces what we think of traditional cornerstones of the US economy. And looking at California specifically, these are the top 7 segments of the recreation economy: boating and fishing, RVing, motorcycling, ATVing, cycling, climbing, hiking, tent camping, hunting and shooting, and snow activities. At the bottom there, you see how California stacks up compared to other states. Largest in GDP, on the smaller side in terms of contribution to GDP, 26th in year-over-year growth, 17th in growth since the start of this satellite account that collects this data. So helpful context for us to have as we consider an Office of Outdoor Recreation in California. Let's talk about the map. What you're seeing here is the map of current states who've created offices or identified directors for outdoor recreation, including some that we see as having strong potential in the next year and the following year. That 2026 designation for California is based on recent conversations, but of course, things change quickly in state government depending on priorities. But this is where we see the map today. And this all started a little over 10 years ago with one governor who recognized that the outdoor recreation economy deserved a place in his government. That was Governor Gary Herbert of Utah, who created the first state office of outdoor recreation in 2013. And in his words, this office would unify the state's efforts and optimize their ability in Utah to promote travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation, to appropriately utilize public lands and bring stakeholders together in that effort. And since that time, and of course, Colorado soon followed in 2015, many states across the country have taken notice. 24 states have now created these offices to help their recreation economies thrive. And look at this map here. This is pretty extraordinary. You have governors from Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania and Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, as well as Sarah Huckabee Sanders of Arkansas,
Okay,
and
this is
Doug
Josh.
Burgum of North Dakota, who, of course, is the new nominee
Hey,
to
I
be
got your email.
Secretary of
How's it
the
going?
Interior in the Trump administration. And each governor or each legislature created
They
their
need to
office in a
order,
slightly
okay?
different way. Getting some feedback. I think someone's microphone is still open. Each governor or each legislature created this office in a slightly different flavor, but the common theme was a centralized and dedicated home to coordinate efforts across agencies, to identify new opportunities for economic growth, to connect all communities to the benefits of time outside, especially those who've been historically excluded or discriminated against in the outdoors, and to promote responsible recreation in a state's most treasured places. And I want to talk about what these offices have provided over that time. And of course, Conor will go in more depth about Colorado's role. But what you're seeing in bold here are the 5 pillars of the confluence of states, which is the leading coalition of all the state offices of outdoor recreation across the country. And these pillars represent all the benefits of time outside. And so you could look at the opportunity and experience pillar, where Massachusetts has pioneered an accessibility and trails initiative, or public health, where Oregon did groundbreaking research on the connection between nature in Oregon and health benefits, or the work that Colorado is doing with their outdoor recreation grants or supporting their rural communities. I could go on, and a great resource for these success stories is the Confluence of States 2024 annual report, which I can drop into the chat after my remarks. But suffice it to say that without these offices, many of these accomplishments would not happen for states' outdoor recreation economies. I want to leave you with 5 strategies for how to make this happen in California. First is to build a bipartisan recreation economy coalition. CORP is a perfect example. It's a coalition of people and organizations who love outdoor recreation and who would benefit from an official office or outdoor recreation division. Ideally, these are businesses, nonprofits, and leaders from all corners of the state, both urban and rural, who can speak to the importance of California's outdoor recreation economy across the political spectrum. And creating an office like this doesn't mean that a coalition has to agree on everything. It just means that you believe that the outdoors deserves a place in state government. And the business voice is so critical here. The sooner that California's biggest outdoor businesses are at the table, the better. A great anecdote from Michigan is that they were helped in large part thanks to a tweet from Carhart at Governor Whitmer to create an office, and that really helped move the process along. Second is to create the mission. What is it that California's outdoor recreation economy really needs? And again, I would point back to the confluence of states and their 5 pillars as providing inspiration for what a California Office of Outdoor Recreation might provide, and using some selection of those pillars, as well as existing accomplishments of state offices, to determine what a California Office of Outdoor Recreation would do that is distinct from other state agencies. Third is to find allies in government. So within this coalition, who knows a state legislature or a state legislator who likes to get outside, or who on the governor's team is an advocate? I know that the First Lady of California has been very involved in outdoor recreation access initiatives. What donors or political figures are involved in outdoor recreation? Doing this kind of research to understand who your allies are can shave months or years off the process to get meetings with friendly audiences. Fourth is to choose the path. And by that, I mean, are we going through legislation or executive action or through a budget process? I think once you know who your allies are in government who will go to bat for outdoor recreation, you can unite around the path that will get you the structure you need and determining what agency it will live in. And finally, ask for help. As Conor will showcase, there's so much wisdom among the 24 states out there who've already created these offices. and so many leaders who can provide feedback and words of advice. ORR has tons of resources to support you in your work. We worked closely with the confluence of states to help unpack how states make the most impact in these processes. I'd be happy to connect you with other states in similar situations. The biggest theme of successful states is having the right messenger with the right message at the right time. The coalition really needs to think about who from within your team is the best to drive home your message at any given time with a given audience, and finding the aspects of outdoor recreation that connect with the people in positions of power. I'm going to hold my remarks short here, and I'm really excited to hear what Conor has to share, and I'm looking forward to Q&A very shortly. Thanks so much, Lexie.
Great. Thanks so much, Chris. That was really insightful. And I love that you brought a California office into it with the agriculture example. I think that will sit really well with the legislature and the administration. So I appreciate that. Conor, I'd love to hear what you have to say. I know you were involved with or around when Hickenlooper established the OREC, and I know you can give us a great background on that. So I'll let you lead now.
Great. Yeah, thank you. And great job, Chris. I'm just going to be talking to you guys. Chris is a classic overachiever, put together slides. I didn't know that was coming. So I will just be talking at you, but I'll try to be quick and engaging here. And Chris, great job just kind of setting that broader vantage point of the size of the industry, different ways that we've created these offices. ORR has played a pivotal role, from the beginning, but especially I think in the last, couple years in this broader movement, because that's what this has been is a movement to give real, commensurate voice and power and influence to this massively important industry nationally and in all of our states in terms of economic impacts, job impacts, all the different health impacts. It's a long, long list of benefits and ways that the outdoor economy and ecosystem affects all of us. And historically, we just haven't had that. We haven't been at that table in terms of policy decisions, in terms of getting more people outside, all those different things. So we've had some great wins, but there's so much more we could be doing commensurate to a $1.2 trillion industry and 5 million American jobs. So huge shout out to our ORR for their kind of national leadership on all of that. So I think what I'll do real quick is kind of walk through, give you a little bit of a case study of what Chris is talking about specific to a state. And obviously that state is Colorado in this case. So history of the office, we created this office back in 2015. I, at that point, had just started working for our former governor, John Hickenlooper, who's now a U.S. Senator, still a great champion for outdoor recreation. We're actually working with him on the idea of a federal OREC office. I can talk a little bit more about that later. But we were the second state after Utah to create this office, and he and I were sitting in a briefing with the Outdoor Industry Association, OIA, and they had given us, some of the first state-by-state economic impact numbers that had ever been gathered. And no surprise, the numbers were huge. I think at that point it was, it was billions of dollars, a couple 100,000 jobs. And Hickenlooper turned to me as we were walking out. He was like, "We got to create an office. This is too big and important of a thing to not have an office being the steward of this industry and all these jobs." I was 25. I had no idea how to create a government office, but we pulled together some of the right folks, and we wrote an executive order that the governor signed, and we ultimately seeded this office. There's a lot of debate over where to put it in the economic development arm of the state, in the Colorado Parks and Wildlife Department, or the broader Department of Natural Resources, which is over Colorado Parks and Wildlife. Tons of debate, and every state has decided, kind of differently, and that makes sense. There's not one, best way. But we ultimately decided to put it in the economic development and international trade arm because we felt in the state of Colorado, this is by most measurements the largest industry in the state, and a huge percentage of our overall workforce. And so we wanted it to have a real clear economic development, bent. There are kind of 4 different pillars that we created for this office, that verticals that we work in. So one is economic development, keeping that ecosystem strong and functioning. Second is stewardship and conservation. In that regard, we support a lot of the great work already being done. So work at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, or work with nonprofit partners, oftentimes bringing industry voice and support and perspective into those important conversations. The third is workforce development and education, keeping that talent pipeline strong, because we know wherever you're able to either create, attract, and retain talent is where that industry and ecosystem will thrive. And so through our partnership and work, every Colorado State institution of higher education now has a degree program or certificate program in some form or fashion of outdoor recreation, which is excellent. And then the fourth is kind of public health and trying to create more equitable access to nature, working at that nexus of, time outside and all the different, mental, physical, emotional health benefits that come with that. So those are our 4 kind of main focus areas. In terms of the creation, we pretty quickly hired a guy named Luis Benitez, who some of you might know, really well-known mountaineer, and just a force of nature to really get this thing up and off the ground. Then I had the opportunity, as kind of the governor's general senior advisor, to work with him on a bunch of different initiatives as we started the office. So we worked on bringing VF Corp here to Colorado, relocating that headquarters here. Worked on creating the Confluence and the Confluence Accords, which we signed in North Carolina in 2017. And that idea was, again, thinking of this as a greater movement, and not just, states competing against each other, but that we would all benefit from creating these offices in all 50 states, and then working together to grow this movement, to further the industry. And ultimately, we use the 4 pillars from Colorado, from the formation of our office, as kind of a basis in some ways for the Confluence pillars. And so you can see, you might have noticed that those pillars are very, very similar, those focus areas. And that's a beautiful thing. And because, as Chris alluded to, this is a really diverse group of states, geographically, politically, and there's something I find really inspiring and maybe reassuring, in the sense that this is still something we can all come together around. There, might be things in, public land usage, or, different things that, not everyone agrees on, and that's okay. But the overarching pillars of, economic development and stewardship and conservation, public health and opportunity, workforce development, that's something we all agree on. That's something that, every governor that's signed on, and every state that's, included, wants to see. And I think there's a lot of power in finding those areas that we can unite around in this day and age. So I think a lot of potential, around that. Just seeing a question here. Yeah, so great question, Michael. So question for Michael, asking where does the OREC office sit in the Colorado State Agency ecosystem, a Department of Natural Resources agency, a division of Parks and Rec, something else? So we are a division of the Colorado Office of Economic Development and International Trade. Bit of a mouthful. We call it OEDIT. And it's made up of about 10 external facing divisions and a few internal facing divisions. So we are one of those divisions. Other divisions, for example, are global business development, or the Colorado Film and Television Office. The Colorado Tourism Office is a sister division. And so we work really, really closely in that ecosystem. But one of the things, yeah, thank you, Chris. One of the things that is most important in the creation of these offices is the understandings and the structure and relationship with your other key, especially internal agency partners.
Listen to this corp thing.
And so for us,
I'm listening.
Unmuted here. So for us, that's the Department of Natural Resources and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, probably our closest internal partner. And in the 10 years that we've had this office, that relationship, just to be very honest, sometimes it's been good, sometimes it's been not quite as good, and it heavily affects the success of our work. We are still a relatively small office. We've got 5 members, relatively small budget. We get a couple $100,000 from the general fund, and then have to get creative on how we fund the rest of our work. But ultimately, what that means is we rely heavily on partnerships, and our success is heavily dependent on that. And so that has been a lot of our focus. It's just building those partnerships, leveraging partnerships. And I think that's true for just about all these offices. Utah has the largest one, but they still rely heavily on partnership, just like the rest of us, I would say. I also, it's funny, Chris, that you mentioned, that comparison to agriculture, because I was kind of thinking along the same lines, and had pulled some numbers. In the state of Colorado, agriculture, if we're doing a pretty apples to apples comparison, it's about 9.4 billion in value added to the Colorado economy. Outdoor recreation is about 17.2 billion, so fairly significant difference there. In the Colorado Agriculture Department, a partner of ours, and they do fantastic work. They have about 300 people, north of 300 people in that, and that is a full state agency. And they are able to deliver, incredible results for our agricultural industry. And that industry is a super important part of our brand as a state, our identity, our history, our heritage. I would argue that outdoor recreation, is at least equally as important to our brand, our identity, our heritage. And so I always find that comparison to be a really compelling one, because every state has a Department of Agriculture, everyone that I'm aware of. And it helps support a really important industry and ecosystem, and that's what this is ultimately. Can look a little bit different, can live in different areas, but that's the basic concept we're talking about here. So real quickly, let me tick through a few other things here. Safe to say, this office has benefited the state in a number of different ways, a lot of different ways to measure that. But I think probably the best one is BEA data from, starting in 2012, when they first started measuring outdoor recreation as a subset, kind of a subsector or a satellite account, to 2023, the last data we have. And so Colorado, we've seen, in terms of value added or GDP growth, and adjusted for inflation, we're at about 7.2% growth. So that's fourth of all 50 states over that period. In terms of compensation growth, we're also sitting at fourth at 6.6%. Again, all of this inflation adjusted. And we're sitting at sixth in terms of job growth as well. So we've been, at the top, or near the top, of all of those numbers. And not to brag, but Chris did tell me, a month ago or so, that when you aggregate all of the numbers over that time, Colorado does sit at number one. So I've been mentioning that when it's appropriate, just some light bragging. But I think it is safe to say that a lot of it's a really strong industry and economy here. But we've also been able to I think, help it grow in really thoughtful ways. We serve as a really key convener in the space that otherwise, previously was not there, especially in connecting industry with nonprofit, with other, government sectors, with education sectors. We sit really as a really trusted and well-known, um, neutral party that has the best interests of the state and all of those parties at the center of that. And there's just no one else in the state of Colorado that does that. And we've been able to create other really important entities through this work. We just were successful in creating a bipartisan outdoor recreation caucus at the state capitol. So House and Senate. Colorado never had that before, which is kind of wild, but that's going to be a huge thing going forward. We're working on creating an outdoor industry alliance or outdoor business alliance, which will happen this year. Again, something Colorado never had before. And, we're also now in the process of, planning decades in advance around recreation, around the growth of this industry, around the way that recreation intersects and interacts with all of our conservation efforts, with our climate resiliency efforts in this state. None of that was happening before, and recreation was really just not at that table in the way that it really needed to be. We're making huge progress on gathering better data, both from for the industry, workforce and labor data, but also where people are recreating, frequency, those hot spots, so that we can build infrastructure accordingly. We're advocating for increased funding for infrastructure. We helped create the Colorado Outdoor Equity Fund, which it'll be $4 million a year to break down those barriers of access to the outdoors, and likely we'll be able to get that up to 5 or 6, hopefully by the end of this legislative session. So just a couple examples. One other that I'll give you quickly is, we worked with Outside Interactive, really big media conglomerate in space that's headquartered in Boulder, to create the Outside Summit and Festival. And this probably doesn't happen without the OREC office really bringing the weight and some investment from the state into this. And the idea is we wanted to create the gathering place for both the outdoor industry, but also outdoor enthusiasts, and engage the public and consumers in a different way, kind of like a South by Southwest of all things outdoors. And that we did that last summer, hugely successful. We're doing it again this summer. It will be even bigger and better. But it's also those types of maybe unorthodox and a little bit more innovative things that these offices can do when they're trusted in that space, and have the support of the governor, have some resources. So just one more example there. A couple final things that I'll mention. Sitting within the economic development and international trade arm of the state, we have a strong, economic development bent. And so we are connected into many of our business support and incentive programs through our office. We have, with American Rescue Plan Act dollars, we had never been a grant-making office before I came in 2022. But over the last, nearly 3 years now, we created two grant programs with federal dollars. One was the Outdoor Recreation Industry Impact Fund, or ORIF, and that we dispersed money to both for-profit businesses and nonprofits that could show a demonstrable loss in revenue or an increase in cost, or both, over COVID. Because one thing we knew was that recovery was really, really uneven. Some folks did really well, some parts of the industry did really well, and some were slower to recover. And so in doing that, it wasn't a huge amount, but we granted out about 1.8 million. And we retained or created, over 400 jobs through that work. Many, many in rural Colorado, many that would have gone away. And many of these companies, being core and long-standing members of those communities. The other one was the Colorado State Outdoor Recreation Grant, COSORG. And we made grants. We're still in that process. I think we'll make just probably south of 60 grants through that. And that's a little bit more, 3.8 million. In outdoor recreation infrastructure, workforce development, kind of marketing and promotion, and then planning and technical assistance. And one grant that is just getting a ton of media coverage right now, the largest one we made was to a ski area down in Huerfano County, one of the poorest counties in the state, kind of south central, not a super well visited area. It had gone away 20 years ago. We gave them a $250,000 grant to bring it back. And that will be the major economic engine of that very poor community. It will be the biggest employer, and it will provide much more easy, effective, affordable access to skiing for all of kind of southeastern Colorado, where otherwise, if folks could afford, they would be driving, 2-3 hours to Breckenridge, where, a day pass is costing, $250. So, and they'll be able to provide free skiing for a lot of the kids. There's a bunch of other great benefits and programs, but it's like those are some of the types of things that, there wasn't an office, there wasn't, a grant program that they could, pull from before. And so interesting intersection of, economic development, access, some workforce, all those different great things. Finally, different programs that we also kind of work on: the job growth incentive tax credit, the strategic fund job growth incentive, the rural jumpstart program to create jobs in rural Colorado, the advanced industries accelerator program. We've made grants to a number of different, and these are all agency programs, not just our division, but we've made grants to a number of different advanced OREC, advanced industry companies through that. So, and there's actually a list of another probably 190 business support programs that we work closely with, or have in the toolbox. But that's one of the great things about being housed within the economic development and trade arm of the state is we really bring that economic development angle into it. So I know that was a tremendous amount of information, and I didn't have slides like Chris, so you just had to look at me. But hopefully that was interesting, and really happy to answer any questions that I can.
Awesome. Great, Connor. I'm going to bring us back to Spotlight.
Oh, and actually, I just saw a question. Oh, sorry, Lexie. I just saw a question from Richard that he asked here at the beginning. This idea on accessible recreation. Huge focus. I think it's come up a couple times. I mentioned the Colorado Outdoor Equity Fund. I know California has a great equity fund that probably does some of that similar work. We've also, we just went through a process that was kind of kicked off by the legislature to convene an actual subcommittee around trying to create more access for persons with disability, especially in Colorado, across all different mediums of outdoor recreation. That turned into a number of different policy recommendations that will ultimately go to the legislature. But we found that to be a pretty helpful tool. But by far the most important thing we've done in Colorado is the creation of that outdoor equity fund, and just trying to get the funding, continue to raise it to meet the need, because we have observed a tremendous amount of need. We're about 20x to 30x oversubscribed on every cycle we do through that fund.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned the Outdoor Equity Grant Program. We do have one in California. I might bite my words, but I think we are the first in the nation to have it. But Yeah, we actually have seen some hurdles over that process in the grant application this past year, and the administration has told us they will work on it immediately this year. But this is a great example of something we think an OREC would have helped with, and this problem would not be, basically they postponed it, and there's been this headache with it, and some budget cuts with it. So we think an OREC would be a great advocate for this within the administration. And then going back to what Richard's question was in the chat for those that don't have access to it, Richard asked, what about talking about accessible outdoor recreation with all constituents, including those with disabilities? Would they be included in the discussion? We're believed to be approximately 15 to 20% of the California population, but have almost no access to outdoor recreation. So I loved your answer, Connor. That's awesome. Chris, I know you put something in the chat. Do you want to share that?
Yeah, Massachusetts, one of the more recent offices of outdoor recreation, has launched this Trails for All initiative, specifically directed at improving access for folks with disabilities. I noted also in the chat Tennessee State Parks, which is part of the purview or partners with Tennessee's Office of Outdoor Recreation, has a huge accessibility goals by 2030. So it is definitely an existing competency within current state offices of outdoor rec.
Awesome. Thanks. We had a question from Rob in the chat as well. From the user perspective, how will an Office of Outdoor Recreation directly benefit California's mountain bikers and the trails we ride? Connor, do you want to talk about mountain biking in Colorado?
Yeah, we work really closely with all of our different mountain bike groups. We, as you might imagine, have many, probably similar to California. It's a great question. We have been working really closely. In Colorado, there's a number of different either departments or agencies from the state side that have kind of influence there. Our Colorado Trails program actually sits within Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And one thing that we had to do, and again, I think we could have done this better from the beginning, this was a learning point, but just to clarify roles as much as possible. So we've now done a lot of that work, and in the space of especially like recreation management and land management, and a lot of that experiential piece, we really support Colorado Parks and Wildlife and some of the other federal agencies that manage land, because we are not a land manager in that work. But one example that we're working on right now is we're trying to expand the funding source for both building trail infrastructure and also operations and maintenance around the state. And through that data that we're gathering, trying to get a better sense of it's because it's recreation and it's conservation data. So with really high value, high ecological value or high conservation value land, where should we not be building new trail, and where can we build new trail? Where does it make a lot more sense, so that we can continue to grow and expand those opportunities. We're also interestingly working with the Colorado Mountain Bike Association on what would it look like to have some sort of very modest fee structure, similar to what we do for sportsmen, hunters, and anglers, to be able to just have some dedicated revenue, even though we understand that wouldn't cover everything. But there's been some real interest from those groups of wanting to chip in and play a role, especially as it pertains to these trails. So we work really, really closely with them, and I think through our work we will be able to greatly, I think, increase the quality of that experience.
Awesome. I actually haven't heard that thought for mountain biking before, so that's very interesting. Chris, I think you had some great answers in chat as well. What ideas do you have for how mountain bikers can interface?
Yeah, I suggested some ideas that a state office might support a particular group with, like mountain biking, including directing business support services or identifying business support services that would pertain to mountain bike retail stores or guides and outfitters, being that forum through which groups like California Mountain Bike could connect with the governor's administration or with federal agencies or state agencies Also just like being part of the marketing voice for the economic impact of mountain biking in California. The stats that I shared during my presentation aren't well known. And so having that voice in state government to say, you know what, biking is an X billion-dollar contributor to California is just a helpful additional voice. I talked about support services to rural communities to understand how to best tap into trails or mountain bike infrastructure for locally informed economic development, helping California state parks identify prime opportunities for trail development, providing a forum for any sort of user conflicts between mountain bikes and different groups to come up with mitigation strategies proactively. These are some of the ways I've seen state offices play a role in the past.
Awesome. As you can see, mountain bikers roll deep in California, so
Mhm.
that'll be largely a part of this process of creating an OREC once we get one. Chris, I'm curious, do you have any favorite examples of how having an office in a state has helped boost their numbers economically?
Well, I mean, there's the direct things like recruiting new businesses, which I've seen in North Carolina. I know Colorado's played a central role in getting new businesses. Then, of course, there's the increased or improved access to the outdoors, which results in economic benefits, not just from the purchases of new gear and apparel, but also all these auxiliary benefits to recreation communities, going to those restaurants and small businesses after a great day on the trail. When you improve access to the outdoors, you also improve that connection to the nearby communities. I was on a call yesterday with Tennessee's director of outdoor rec, and he was asked before and after stats after the creation of their Office of Outdoor Rec. And of course, it's not an X creates Y sort of thing entirely, but the office has played a role. And prior to their office creation, they were at $11 billion in economic output. And I think most recently they were closer to 13. So they've already seen some improvement there. Um, Economic impact is generated in a variety of different ways. And I think from Conor's examples, in terms of the ways they're investing in Colorado, you can see all the different ways that value would be generated. I
Great,
also
thank you.
noticed a question in the chat about where these offices sit, and I wanted to just share a resource. Let me just share my screen again.
Yes, for everyone, Michael asked in the chat, is it typical for ORECs to sit in the Office of Economic Development? If so, why is that? Why not sit within the division that manages recreation? I'm not convinced recreation economy should be the foundation of this office. I'd rather see it as a pillar like stewardship accessibility. Is this a crazy idea? I don't think
So
it's crazy.
first of all, handsome guy on the right here. There's Conor looking at some welding and manufacturing in Colorado. So here's a resource that shows where these offices are created, and it really runs the gamut. Some are in places like state parks, some are in tourism, some of them are in natural resources, some are in economic development. And the reason for this is because different states have sort of different mantras or philosophies about how this should work. A reason that many have put it in economic development is because they see state parks or natural resources as the domain in which recreation is managed, and different user groups are provided access in certain places or another. Whereas one could make the argument that economic development is about what outdoor recreation could be, setting a forward-thinking path for the state in terms of priority strategies, investments, and initiatives that are going to take a state's outdoor recreation economy from a foundational level to a new level in the future. It's not about deciding who can do what where. That is oftentimes the domain of state parks and natural resources, but rather about deciding what a state's outdoor rec economy can be. And this rural economic development angle is a huge one. Obviously, since the pandemic, people's behaviors, work-life balance has totally shifted. People are more mobile than ever before, and quality of life is one of the largest drivers of economic development. And in sort of different aspects of quality of life, outdoor recreation access ranks near the top. So having it in economic development offers ease of access to resources, technical assistance, and connections, especially for rural communities to understand how outdoor recreation can play a role in their future economic potential. So that's my 2 cents, Conor. I don't know if you want to add anything there.
Yeah, I mean, very well said, Chris, and thanks for sharing this great resource that you guys helped put together. And yeah, Michael, it really runs a gamut. It's depends on, kind of what, that state, the characteristics of that state, and really the thinking and the desires of, if it's the governor who's, leading on that, or if it's a number of legislative champions, or, a group like Corp, whatever, their thinking is there. And the reality is that it also, it can start in one place and then move to another place. We've seen that happen in Michigan. We've seen it happen in a couple states. And that's okay. This is still a relatively new movement. I think what I would say, because I've been asked, even by this new governor when he came in, and other leaders, does it make sense, to move this to the Department of Natural Resources, for example? And my answer to this point has been no. I think we, for Colorado, are in the right place because this is the biggest, arguably most important industry in the state, source of jobs in every corner of this state. It was one of the major drivers of our recovery from the pandemic. Again, I've said it's, core to our brand, our identity, all those things. But I'll say that with a caveat, because that caveat is, if you're not able to build really good relationships and have clear communication and really role definement with your other close partners, like for us, the Colorado Tourism Office, Department of Natural Resources, and Colorado Parks and Wildlife, then you will have problems. And that's true of anywhere where you put this thing. Like, you have to, in some way, put the time and effort in to ensure that, those bodies are collaborating and coordinating really well. Wherever you put it, if you're able to do that, I think you will see by far the best results. And again, through that, we are still able to have a pretty significant impact on the actual experience and the management, even though, a lot of that is truly owned by Colorado Parks and Wildlife.
Thanks for that thorough response, Conor. We're very much exploring our options with it, whether that's a hybrid office between two different agencies. We're working that out with stakeholders as we dive into this a bit further in California again, because the first time we ran the bill, second time and third time, it was all housed differently. And I want to make sure we have a cohesive concept together before we introduce anything. So that's great. I want to be mindful of time. Yeah.
Oh, just real quick. One other thing
Yeah.
we're actually in Colorado is, do we formalize some sort of, governor's commission or something on all the facets of recreation experience, management, economy, workforce, and jobs, with all those kind of key players being at the table to coordinate a little bit better, and potentially even, attaching a fund to that, to kind of fund what, doesn't neatly fall into any one of those buckets. So we continue to play around with it and look to evolve, this office and this work in Colorado. And I think that's another key part. It's like, this is all pretty new. We've got great partners like ORR, all of this, all the states, the directors, we all want to help this movement. We're happy to have these conversations. We're happy to chat with, policymakers and decision makers. So we're all in this together.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to be mindful. Are you both okay right now on time? I have a couple of questions. Well, first off, Conor and Chris, please chime in as well if you have an answer for this. What types of federal funding has the OREC received in Colorado? Because we have a feeling, and we've been trying to track some dollars that we might have missed out on in California because of it.
Yeah, great question. So, and pretty simple answer. We received 2 tranches from the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, different areas within that. One was the state travel, tourism and outdoor recreation, fund or bucket within the Economic Development Administration, the EDA. And that was the larger amount, the 3.9 million. And then the other one was through the state and local fiscal recovery program. I think that's it. Another long, government acronym. But this is really important in this conversation. but not for this office. That money would not have gone back into the industry in the way, and really, I mean the outdoor ecosystem more broadly than just the industry. But you know, might have still gone towards general tourism, which was mostly used for some marketing. The other tranche, you know, who knows where that would have ended, but you know, not an insignificant amount of money that otherwise, I think, pretty safe to say would not have gone into the Colorado outdoor ecosystem.
If you said 3.9 million and the other was
about 2. So yeah, I mean, we're probably talking close to, you know, 6 million here. And then there's been some other smaller things, but those are really the 2 big ones that we can point to.
Just an anecdote from our end. Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation is the state agency channeling American Rescue Plan funds from the Travel, Tourism, and Outdoor Recreation pot at the Economic Development Administration. They are granting Maine Outdoor Brands, who's their outdoor business alliance, in conjunction with ORR to develop a workforce development strategy in the outdoor recreation economy in Maine. And that grant would not have been possible without the Maine Office of Outdoor Recreation. I do unfortunately have to jump though, Lexie. I have another call.
You're all good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, this has been so great.
Yeah, really grateful for your time. Yeah, and Conor, do you want to, my last question for you is about the federal office, if you want to give a little brief on that.
Yeah, happy to, and thanks. I had that in my notes and felt I was, you know, running on too long. So really exciting on the federal office. You know, this is an idea that we've been, you know, kind of batting around since we started, you know, the Colorado office in 2015. And I know others have been talking about it even longer, probably. But Luis Benitez and I have certainly been, you know, chatting about it since then. And, you know, the idea is the benefit is very similar to the benefit for these different, you know, in these different states with state offices. You want someone with you know, an ecosystem and an economy this big and important. You want an air traffic controller in a massive, complex bureaucracy to, you know, convene, to direct policy, to direct funding, all those different things. There's so many different federal agencies that, you know, somehow, some way interact or touch recreation, both on the economy side, the experience side, workforce, you know, all those different things, health. And so really the office plays a very similar role just at a federal level. You know, we were making some good progress, I think, with the last administration. There was some openness to this. And really the idea was, you know, maybe we seed it through a secretarial order, which can be done unilaterally in one of the key agencies. You know, we were considering Interior, we were considering the Department of Commerce. Again, similar exercise that all these states do on the state level. And I actually think there's still a good possibility with this incoming administration that we might be able to do something like this. Again, this is an area where, especially when it's framed in kind of, you know, jobs and economic terms, you know, it should be pretty or even transpartisan. And so that would really be the idea. I think it would be tremendously valuable for, you know, all of us on the state side. Even now, you know, we've got great resources like ORR, who are, you know, kind of that association of associations. OIA kind of plays a role federally. But within the federal government, there's not, it too often can feel like a black box when we need answers. And it would be incredibly helpful to have a real point person or a point office that we could all go to help navigate that big bureaucratic system.
Awesome. How can folks get involved with that effort?
Good question. We're you know, the few of us that have been working on it are kind of regrouping a little bit, trying to chart the best path forward. You know, Doug Burgum, who's going to be Secretary of Interior, very likely. We helped him create an office. ORR and the Confluence helped them create an office, an OREC office in North Dakota over the past year. And they've got a great guy running that, Cody. And so, you know, Governor Burgum really gets this work, gets the importance of this work. And so there could be a great opportunity there with Burgum, whether it's, the creation of federal office or just, moving focus and resources and investment into this space. I think that's a really great opportunity that is one that we could all maybe work together on.
Great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's good to see some hope in the administration on that. So that's great.
Yeah, and sorry, that was not the clearest answer. There's not. We're kind of regrouping. We're chatting. We're going to come up with kind of what that strategy should look like. There's a number of different angles to do this. You could do it through a secretarial order. You could run legislation, and I think we have senators that are certainly interested in doing that. Number of different avenues we could go about this, and so I think we're trying to let some of the dust settle, and then we'll kind of plot the best strategy. But feel free to follow up with me if you're interested in getting involved.
Awesome. Maybe we need to have a future webinar in our series on the federal. So stay tuned.
Says into that too. I know he's been a really vocal champion on that.
Definitely. Great. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your time. If you want to get involved with the California OREC initiative, we'll be holding stakeholder meetings this year. So please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Become a corp member if you're not. And thank you everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Lexie. Thanks, everyone.